Welcome to Spotlight. I'm your host, Amitha. Join us weekly to get inspired by success stories. Reading is good for the physical and mental health. As we read, our brains simulate real experiences. But there are very few authors who can have us glued to their book from start to finish. Our guest today is one such author. 2 Giller Prizes, 1 Governor General's Prize, many shortlists, finalist in Canada's Read, and member of the Order of Canada. His latest novel is receiving rave reviews. It's with great pleasure that I welcome to our show author M.G. Vassanji. It's nice to have you with us today.
Nice to be here.
We would like to know a little bit about your background to start with, about your growing up and your education.
Well, I was born in Nairobi, Kenya, and I grew up in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Went to school there, and I went from my university in the United States. That's about it, my growing up. My background is Gujarati. My grandparents came from Western Gujarat, we call Kathiawar, to East Africa, 100 years ago. And that's about it.
Okay. What brought you to Canada?
Well, after I finished my doctorate in the United States, physics, I got a fellowship to come to Atomic Energy of Canada to work there for a couple of years. I worked there a couple of years, and then I had a research fellowship at the University of Toronto, and decided to stay in Toronto.
Oh, nice. Now, this is interesting. I heard the field in terms of what you were educated in and took your fellowship in versus what you're doing with writing as a career. So how did that happen?
Well, I think writing, like music, if you play music, it just is there. And you have the need to write, you write whatever your other profession or career is. So it was, for me, natural. I loved to write in school. Maybe one or two students were like me who actually enjoyed what we call the English composition classes. So it was always there, and when I was at MIT, I did a course just for fun. I thought it was easy grades, but we were asked to keep a journal. So I started keeping a journal way back, long ago. I enjoyed writing, but of course writing professionally a full-length novel or a collection of stories is work. So I had to make a decision, do I really want to do it? But for 10 years I was doing both. I worked at the University of Toronto, I was doing research, and then in the evening I would write. Didn't have a television, so it was easier. And that was it. But I felt the need to write because those of us, especially who came from East Africa, for example, our stories had not been told. And once I was here, I realized that I would not be going back. Because I did not come from East Africa with the intention of staying. I just went to university. Then it happened that I realized I could not go back. Then all the stories, my family stories, community stories would be lost. So there was also this other incentive or urgency to just record everything I remembered.
Wow. So it sounds like your life experiences is what inspires your content for all the work
Well, life experiences are based on who we are, our histories. So I had to look up the history of my people, which we never bothered. When you are young, you don't care where your parents came from, which part of Gujarat the grandparents came from, because the story is there, it's accessible. But when you leave the place you were born in, then you realize that it's going, and therefore you have to
put it down.
Not only put it down, but also find out. I did a lot of research. I spoke to old people, looked up diaries and journals of the British administrators and so on. It's not just remembering and writing.
Okay, good. So well researched, but the passion came from within, self-taught, but with your professional and educational background, that discipline helped.
Yeah.
You did mention, okay, you didn't have TV at the time, so all the distractions of day-to-day living was not an issue for you because the passion was within, you had the discipline,
Yeah, the
and then
passion
you
was
kept
there, and the
it. Yeah.
discipline, of course, came from my profession, like in science, in physics. So you don't just do it for, do something and you finish it.
Okay,
So that discipline helped me to, every time I started a book, I always finished it,
great.
whatever it ended up with.
So enlighten us about some of your work thus far.
Well, I started with, I thought it would be good just to write stories. And remember, just putting stories based on vignettes from my life back home. And this was a way of recreating, for example, the street I grew up in. A lot of writers have done that, Naipaul and others. Just first thing you do is recreate that street or neighborhood. Naguib Mahfouz has done it, Mida Kaili. I did that, writing just story, and somehow bringing out, recreating the street and the city I grew up in. But at the same time, I think I was also writing a novel where I was exploring memory. To write a novel based on memory. But it's not just writing down memories, because that's not a novel. That's just fragments. But how to give it shape, how to have a complete product, but it's inspired by many memories. Your own memories, the memories of your parents, the memories of your grandparents, the history of the place. That so it's basically a memory of the place, the history, which was East Africa, which was German and British and so on. And all of that has to go in. It took me about 9 years before the book came. That novel was published.
So, as we heard, a lot of hard work did go into it, but it was definitely fueled by a passion and discipline, as we heard. So, this is great. And now you have, after many successful, work that has been published thus far, now we have another great novel that's going to launch here in Toronto. We are going to find out more about that. But before that, it's time for a short break. Welcome back to Spotlight. We are talking to the multiple award-winning author, M.G. Vassanji. So this is exciting. Your new novel is getting launched at the prestigious Aga Khan Museum in Toronto on October 23rd. And it's called A Delhi Obsession. It's quite intriguing. Tell us a little bit about how you got into writing this one.
I've been to Delhi many times. It was the first city in India that I went because I was invited there. And then I found it convenient just to go there, and if I want to go elsewhere, to Shimla or Trivandrum or wherever, I would start from Delhi. And I kept going many times. I've been there now numerous times. I won't name the place, but there's a place that I stay at. It's a very kind of elitist club, very convenient also just to go and write. And I would sit there and observe people coming in and leaving. And I thought it would be wonderful to set a novel there. I would tell my wife, I think one day I would like to write a novel, just set there. I think when the time came, I wrote it. I think what went into the novel also, with the idea that, so it's set there, not completely, but that's the main center, and Toronto also. I think what I wanted to look at, just create, is the fact that I found that since my first trip to India, people always want to classify you. They want to pin you down. Who are you? Which caste, which faith? Muslim, Hindu. And once someone knows, or even if you don't tell them, Because you may be an atheist or an agnostic, but they want to put a label on you. Even here, Indians do that. Pakistan, South Asians tend to do that. They want to know exactly who you are. And once that is done, then all the preconceptions come in. They find out we have a Muslim name. Well, there's the meat, there's the non-veg. Say, but I want to eat veg.
They labeling is
really
quite
annoyed me
rampant.
because where I live, at least, when I walk down my street, nobody asks me, do you worship Allah, or you worship Vishnu, or you worship a snake or a stone? I just am. And that's how I prefer to be. So what I did was create a character with that kind of mentality. But someone who was different from me in the sense that he's Punjabi and he comes from, he's been to private schools, so especially he's from Nairobi. And Nairobi people were very westernized. There were private schools, English-speaking private schools. I gave him that background, and he thinks he's left all the baggage behind with his parents and grandparents. But he goes to India for the first time. He goes to Delhi because his grandfather came from Delhi, from Chandni Chowk. And, the question is, has he left everything behind? Or does it catch up with him? And it catches up with him through his grandfather's story and through the fact that he falls in love with a woman because he's widowed. His wife, died in an accident, which is why he decided to go to Delhi, which he had not been, where his grandfather came from. He had heard about it and he thought it was this exotic place and then finally said, let me just go. He goes there and he meets a woman at this club and a passion, late middle-aged passion erupts, and the question is what will happen. It's more complex. That's why I put the obsession, because it's an obsession. Because not only is he of Muslim background, although he claims he doesn't believe, and she is of Hindu background, but she is also married. So this put a double jeopardy.
Interesting, okay.
And so it's an exploration of passion because, especially in Indian marriages, but I think maybe in others too. After people have grown up here and decide on their partner, they become more practical. But the one who looks like a film star, is not really practical. You go for the doctor.
True. It sounds like there's your current novel is tackling a lot of complexities of human relationships from different walks of life, and
and the passion is what I wanted to explore because I think there's an opera the guy is an opera lover, in which the narrator says marriage is a habit, passion is something else, and especially for women from traditional marriages. The idea of passion has never been there.
Yeah.
They've seen it in films.
True. There are certain expectations you need to be bound by, even
so
though
they are trapped.
What is in the movies is portrayed, but you cannot bring that to real life.
That feeling of passion, can it arise later in life? And I'm sure many men and women, they have fantasies of what could have been. Where they go on with the drudgeries of life and taking kids to school and taking kids to music and so on. That have they missed out on something? So for the woman's point of view especially, it's that. And for both, because she is traditional. She goes to temples, she goes to shrines, all the Vaishno Devi and Puri and so on. Whereas he just says, I'm just a Canadian from Kenya. That's what I am, but easy only that.
So this is quite intriguing. I guess we will have to read the book to find out what really happens. And in terms of, like you already mentioned, about the stereotypes that are being tackled and, the narrator's viewpoint on that, the relationship between a widower and a married woman. So there's a lot of stuff that you're tackling in the book, which sounds like it's going to be a very interesting read. It's already receiving reviews, and your works are being compared to the likes of Rohinton Mistry and Salman Rushdie. That's great. And Toronto is lucky because you're launching this at the Aga Khan Museum on October 23rd. We want to talk to you more about that, but before that, it's time for a short break. Welcome back to Spotlight. We are talking to the multiple award-winning author who is launching his latest novel, A Delhi Obsession, at the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto on October 23rd. Let's welcome back Mr. M.G. Vassanji. So this is great. Hats off to you. As we heard, with your passion, with your discipline, you have become a full-fledged author over years, and with lots of work that has received rave reviews, and even with your latest novel. So now I'm going to take a step further into your future and ask you, what's next for you?
I'm looking at, when I've started something, obviously I'm always writing, the life of a scientist. But because my background is science.
Yes, we heard that.
Science was a passion too, physics. And I want to look at the life of a physicist who's from South Asia. And some of the conflicts that he has that involve ambition, plagiarism, and again, in this case, the conflict between science and faith, religion. Because I'm looking at the fact that for some ultra-religious people, the ideas of physics, abstract physics, are blasphemy. So I'm still that part I'm researching, but I want to look at that too, because I think I have time just to explore, look at some philosophical subject, philosophy of science, philosophy of Islam, medieval times and so on. How did people view science? And how does a modern scientist of that background deal with that? Yeah, that's it.
I love it. Like all of your work is tackling topics that every human really goes through. Some of it is unspoken because they think these are topics of taboo, or there are certain expectations to meet within stereotypes. So it sounds like from all your reads, people take away something that they can relate to and apply to their day-to-day life, and kind of get relief from some of that mental struggle that goes within. And these are topics like we all go through. And it's like you mentioned, you watch the movies or read these fairy tales and expect life to be like that. And then you go through that struggle within when you are not that movie star going through that kind of a story, or that princess in the fairy tale who's going through that story. So love the fact that you're tackling some of these issues that everyone goes through. And that's why it's no wonder you're a speaker at this year's launch of the Jaipur Lit Fest in Toronto. So congrats for that as well. Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you, as an established author who is so well-researched and well-written, what is your take on this digital age of reading?
My take is the fact we have to let the world develop as it does. You cannot stop it. I cannot say I don't like it, because it's going to happen anyway, the way it does.
Okay.
As far as electronic books, digital reading, I read them, but I read those books that I would not want to keep at home. When I'm traveling, I want to go to sleep. Or read books, mystery novels that I used to read as a kid. Those I don't want to buy. So I get them from the library as e-books. Then there are, there's fiction, but if it's only very good fiction, it's not accessible normally. So I buy translations. I order them from Arabic, from Hindi, Punjabi, and so on. And there are books, because of the subjects I deal with, the places I come from, Africa, India, Gujarat. There are some books which would never be available on e-books, or that they would not be in good format. Those I order. Books written in ancient times. Recently, 3 years ago, I ordered 10 volumes of the Mahabharata. I don't want to read that, as an e-book.
Okay.
I have to read it. Sometimes
Okay,
you want to go
nice.
back and forth. You would like to keep that. Another was this Persian Shahnameh. That's also I ordered because these are not books you would want as e-books. Unless you trivialize them by going through them fast while you're on the subway and reading on your smartphone. So I don't.
This is great. So it sounds like, it's to each individual his or her own, tackling both kinds of reading, and depending on, what material you're looking into,
Yes,
both
what
could
you think
work,
is precious to you.
Yeah, that's.
I know people who read e-books, but then they go and buy the physical book just to keep at home.
So that's great. So it's great to have your view on that, where you do support it, but it's support both systems.
And of course,
not
when
giving.
books are published here and someone in Africa or India wants to read them, they can only read them as e-books.
Okay, that's a good spin. So this is great, Mr. Vassanji, talking to you today to, understand the mind of a well-established author, where your content comes from, how you got to this point in life, where it started off as a passion hobby and where you've become full-fledged. And we are so lucky to have you launch your next novel here in Toronto. And we wish you all the best with that.
Thank you.
Last words for our audience today?
Just keep reading. I think it's a good. I watch Netflix, but I watch it less and less because they all sound the same. Look, the same story, few stories told over and over. Whereas reading really can dwell on a book, on the writing, like listening to music. Satisfying.
Well said. Well, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was author M.G. Vassanji, who has encouraged us to take up reading to enrich yourselves. That's a wrap for this week's show. Thank you for watching us. Continue to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and write to us at spotlight@ethnicchannels.com. Until next week, this is Amitha signing off, encouraging you to carve out your own spotlight.